Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for Seek Power Always, that power within you to do your greater work in the world. I am so honored to have our next guest on the show, Tracy Melchior, who has had a successful soap opera career with contract roles on Aaron Spelling's Sunset Beach, One Life to Live, and the global phenomenon, The Bold and the Beautiful. Currently, Tracy can be seen on the new BET hit series, Games People Play with Lauren London, and in the beauty campaign for the product Xeomin with Christie Brinkley. In the series finale on the longtime running hit show, Criminal Minds on CBS, Tracy makes a guest appearance. And her feature film, Do You Believe, with Mira Sorvino, was #1 in DVD sales on Amazon and top 10 in the national box office for 3 weeks. Congratulations on that. And Tracy has appeared on Good Morning America, Fox News, and CNN, advocating causes she believes in. In addition, she has authored the testimonial book, Breaking the Perfect 10, and has been a hockey correspondent for Fox World Sports. So that's amazing, Fox Sports West. And she's producing a documentary called MONOCHROME, which we're going to get a little bit deeper into this. It's law enforcement is deep in the heart of all of us, as you well know. And the film is going to be about social impact, film about bridging the divide between police and the community, which is something we desperately need. And when Tracy's not acting, some of you may not know, she's an avid equestrian, and she has placed top 10 nationally in 3 categories in 2018. She is so proficient in her skill in this, it has allowed her to do horse stunts on several projects. And she resides outside of Los Angeles with her husband, who is a longtime LAPD with her 2 sons, her dog, and her horse. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I think you covered it all.
I think so too. And I wanted to let our listeners just look at the scope. I mean, I think as an actress, sometimes people can put you in a certain pigeonhole on a certain role. Maybe they've only seen you in certain ways. And I love just the broadness of what you do and the passion of what that is. And I want to jump into MONOCHROME, and what is it that had you start on this project, and where is it at right now?
Thank you so much for asking, because it consumes so much of me right now. And really the catalyst for it was several years ago, there was a Black Lives Matter police protest. And of course, they have police there, at the protest protecting and, running crowd control, all of those things. And a activists opened fire on police officers, and 5 police officers were killed. 5 or 6, I think it was 5. And I just remember that being like the catalyst for me, where it was like, I need to do something, because we had police officers protecting those protesting them. And then when somebody opened fire on those police officers, they ran towards and continued to protect those protesting them. And I was like, this is just out of control. It's gone too far. And I just knew I needed to do something. And so I was like, what can I do though? As who am I? And then I was like, if not me, then who? And I decided to use my background in acting. I love storytelling. I love peacemaking. I've always been that person with friendships or family that I was like, no, we can all get along. I swear we can find common ground. Let's do it. I can find some common ground here, or challenge that there was that one person who, just seemed to not like me. I would be like, I'm going to make them like me. That's just always been my personality. So I just decided to use my, film, my industry to help my husband's industry, and been working on it for about 3 years, which is crazy.
Well, I'd shared with you right before the show that my husband and I have been long-term police officers. I did 10 years, he did 30. And, I also did a lot of undercover work. And so a lot of the things that people don't see behind the scenes in that work, they don't always understand the full scope of that. And in any profession, I mean, I'm sure you can attest in, whether it's acting or doctors or police officers or firemen, any of those professions, you're going to find, one-offs that can mar the industry, who are going to take things out on their own. They're going to do things differently. But overall, and I'm sure you've seen this with your husband and, the people he's worked with, is that they so selfishly go out day in, day out and risk their lives for the community that they love and do the best that they can when they can. And one of the things that, we talk about, and one of the focuses that you have on your film is addressing fear. And it's really interesting, the things, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's protests, whether it's happening right now, fear is at an all-time high. Yeah. And I'd love for you to speak into, how are you addressing that in the film? How do you address fear in your life? And just how can people look at fear differently?
Well, one of the things that came to mind with me is that the more this goes on in the media, especially, it ramps up fear, but it ramps up fear on both sides. And so if you're watching and, you're thinking, oh my gosh, police officers can just shoot me for no reason. I do nothing wrong. They can shoot and kill me and they're not held accountable. Well, now when I encounter a police officer, I'm more likely to be in a fight or flight type of, physical response, right? I mean, our bodies have a physical response, right, and that can impair my judgment. I actually spoke to a guy named Joseph Ledoux. He's been on Joe Rogan several times. He's the lead neuroscientist in the study of fear and the amygdala. And what happens is, our brain responds to these fears. And now you've got police on the other side, right? And now the cops are getting ambushed more often, more frequently. They're also getting more resistance, less compliance from people when they ask for simple things like, who are you? And so now we've got cops more fearful, and we have people they encounter more fearful. And if you know anything about animal behavior, which it's similar with us and animals, when an animal is cornered or fearful, it's more dangerous. It's a more dangerous animal because you're more likely to lash out. And so we've got this buildup of fear, which is actually, ironically, people are saying, oh, we got to get this narrative out and show how bad police are. It's actually making people less safe, where it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, where it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to kill me, so I got to kill them before they kill me. And now everything's more dangerous. So I kind of tackle that. And I challenge a lot of the narratives, and I do a lot of little anecdotal stories to challenge, okay, so if you're scared of them, I know when I'm scared of somebody, I'm more like, I'll use an aggressive dog as an example. If a dog is acting aggressive to me, I'm more likely to be like, puppy, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. So for me, it's ironic that if you're scared of the police, why you would provoke them. And I'm just trying to appeal to people, to get what they want, to not be harmed by police. Then maybe there's a different way we can go about it, so we don't keep increasing people being harmed by police.
Right, right. Well, I love that you talk about the amygdala, because, people don't realize when you're in a stressful situation, whether it's the police or the community, we don't always act in our best self and our best way. Mm-hmm. And so part of actually what we do is we look at, how is it that we can train officers, have conversations with the community, and teach them some of those skills to shift your brain out of that fright flight situation, so you can come from more of a logical way. What are some of the things that you can say and that you can do? And actually, one of those things is being in a state of gratitude, because you actually cannot be in anger when you are in gratitude. So there's very simple things that you can switch that, our brain is doing, and we don't realize it in the situation, which is why it's so great that there's things like your movie that allow people to have thoughtful conversations, to start asking themselves, how am I going to react in certain situations, and what is that going to look like? So I'm curious, a lot of people may not think in terms of, you've got this famous actress who's done a lot of different things, and your husband who's been on the street as a police officer. It seems like an unlikely pair for you to meet. How did this happen?
Well, I am not what I seem at all. It's ironic because, he's the police officer, I'm the actress. I used to drive a Mercedes and he drove a truck, but on the weekends, he took my Mercedes to the golf course in the country club, and I took his truck to the ranch. It's kind of interesting, but with that said, I grew up in Colorado on a horse ranch and rode horses my whole life. And I met him at a country western bar. And so it was just a bar encounter. But
did he recognize you?
No, not at all.
That's good.
I joked with him because, that whole, first conversation, a lot of times people ask, what do you do? And I was like, I'm an actress. And I'm like, what do you do? He's like, I'm a police officer. And then of course I'm like, where do you work in that? And, of course, his question is, have I seen you in anything? And so I was like, I don't know. Do you watch porn? And he was like, no. And I was like, good answer. Okay. So now I'll tell you. But at that time, I was mostly just doing, little guest star here in like shows like Silk Stockings and High Tide and Hercules and, those kind of TV shows. And then a lot of commercials. And, you spoke about my horseback riding. I actually got into SAG being a stunt double on an Old Spice commercial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fun. So. That's so fun. Well, it's interesting because, with myself coming from law enforcement, it's one of the higher divorce rate professions. And, of course, from a tabloid perspective, we always see, actors and actresses and all those type of things. What do you think? I mean, the fact that you guys have been together over 20 years is impressive. What do you think is the secret that you guys have had this longevity?
Yeah, it's funny because our friends would joke about that. They're like, oh my gosh, between those two professions, good luck, guys.
Right, right.
And I had one friend when I said I met a police officer and I'm crazy about him and I think it's serious. He's like, oh, good. So like half of them cheat and half of them, beat their wives or something was his impression. And I was like, oh, geez. But I was married before. And I will tell you, one of the huge differences with us is my husband and I are believers. And we became believers actually together after we met. But I feel like when it's just you and your husband going like this, like, but I need, but I want, but me, but what about me? Right. And when you put God up here, and then it's like you're going through a belief system, a value system, and kind of a rule book for marriage, it kind of takes the pressure off you guys butting heads about everything. When you have, like a set of rules you agree on. It's just like if you're playing football, if you don't have a rule book for football, right? It's like more likely it's going to end. Have you ever watched like 3-year-olds play a game where it's like they each make up their own rules and it's just constant like bickering?
Right.
And that's what I think happens in marriage. You don't have an established rule book of right and wrong in a marriage necessarily. So I think that's a huge difference. But also I learned a ton from going through my divorce that I was like, okay, I don't want to do that again. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I love that you bring in faith because I think that there is, we see so much eroding of, family and faith and freedom and these foundations that, really make people have a successful life, that have people come together. And there's so many things that can pull people apart. But what are those things that bring people together? And I'm completely with you. I have, a faith. I believe, God. I don't know how people move through things without God. Especially now, it's like there's so much out there. And I'd love to kind of circle back around with the movie Do You Believe? And what's interesting was when you made that, because that's been almost 6 years now. For those who haven't seen it, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. Congratulations on that. And it really looks at what are people's lives like? How do they intersect? It's about 12 people that, the cross intersects. It's asking, why are people drawn together? Like, why are you here? And, looking at the cross in terms of, what is the action? And I thought one of the great things in the film was like, what does your faith in action look like and the impact that we have on other people's lives? How is it that that film impacted your life? What do you do differently? Were you a believer before? What impact did that have for you?
I was a believer before, and the writers of that film wrote "God's Not Dead" as well, and so it was, that it's sort of that kind of realm. That was a very successful faith-based film that I was very bummed I wasn't a part of. And so I know the producers of that. I'd done some other films for them and said, "You guys do something else. I count me in." So I was lucky to be a part of it. As far as like the impact it had on me, I would say I just love being a part of anything where I get response from people about that film helped me so much. Oh my gosh, I was able to take my friend who normally doesn't like Christian films and he loved it. It's kind of like a film. What I loved about it was the characters weren't perfect Christians.
Right.
It was the pastor and his wife, and they were so flawed in it, and it showed all of that. And it just, so many faith-based films show like the Christian's perfect and they're trying to tell the, non-Christian, what to do or whatever. And this was just really more realistic, and the characters were rich and interesting, and it just was a beautiful film. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people could relate to it because I think sometimes when people start talking faith and spirituality, there can be some shame and not living up to certain things, and just, depends on how people were brought up. And, there's a lot of things around religion and, things that are portrayed. And when you see people just doing the best that they can and searching for a higher power, I think it's a beautiful experience. And, I highly recommend that people watch that show and that they get to see that. And then on the flip side, the series with the games people play, right? That's portraying, talk about the polar opposite, right? Where you've got the LA, glitter life. In fact, I love the producer at one point had mentioned something that not all that glitters is gold, right? And it kind of shows this going for this high life in Hollywood. I mean, how many people take a bus to Hollywood looking for the dream? I mean, all these things that happen, and sometimes people sacrifice, their soul, if you will, or who they are in that. What would you say is some of the things in that show? One, do you see that in, as you've kind of moved in and out of Hollywood, are you seeing that? And, how do you separate how you want to be as a person and how you are like in the acting world, and how do those things intersect?
Well, it's funny you talk about that because I actually wrote a book called Breaking the Perfect 10. And it was about how I broke all of God's 10 commandments trying to be Hollywood's perfect 10, just like what you said. It was that I felt like the validation and the, applause that I needed inside came from outside. It came from, being on TV and, being famous and popular, all those things, when it was that God-shaped hole that I was seeking. So those things never satisfied. It was like drinking salt water. It never quenched my thirst. Right. And so I wrote a book about that. And that comes back into games people play, because I have no idea how I got that part, you guys. I actually auditioned for a different part as a publicist in that. I didn't get it. And then I got called back in to read for Roxanne, who was just like that character in the song, right? Turn on your red light. Yeah. So when I went in for it, the character description, when my agent sent it to me, was she's a lesbian. How was that? I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but basically a pimp. Oh, a Hollywood madam. A lesbian Hollywood madam. And I was like, okay.
You gotta dig deep, girl.
I'm like, and it worries me sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like, where's this going to go? But the script I read, I was okay with what she was doing. And so I went for it, and it was recurring, and I wasn't signing a contract. So I knew if it went, where I was against my beliefs or comfort or my husband or anything like that, I would be able to bow out. But I signed on it. And I will never forget the first day walking in. When you work on a a show, the wardrobe people, they usually take like tear sheets or, like fashion prints or whatever, and they have the character name on the wall and just kind of like where they see that character and how they want to dress them and stuff. And I walked in, and I will just tell you, every tear sheet looked nothing like me. It was a very edgy, was an African American edgy type character with like piercings and tattoos and I mean, like very different than me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hi, I'm here to play Roxanne. And I just remember the lady's face, and she's like, oh, okay. And she starts dressing me in this stuff where it was like balloon pants and like flannels like cut off here, that kind of thing, and combat boots and everything. And all of a sudden they take pictures, Polaroids, and then they send them to the producers and they bring them back, and she brings them back. And the next thing I know, our executive producer comes in and she's like, hey, she goes, between me and the wardrobe lady, she goes, Tracy, I mean, I just got hired like the night before. Somebody must have like got sick or something happened, or a better offer. I don't know. They were stuck with me. I don't know how many people they went through, but it was the night before I got hired. And she's like, I read your bio last night and a little bit about you. We're going to go a little different with this character. And I was like, this is why, like, everybody always asks me, like, how do you deal with the no's? Right? Everybody's always like, how do I deal when I'm told no? And what I want to tell people is stop saying no. Stop saying no to everything. Everybody is so oppositionally argumentative in the world. Their knee-jerk reaction is always, no, 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 not for me. No, thank you. No, thank you. Nothing. And then everybody's like, how do you deal with no? I'm like, well, if more of us would be open, and I don't, obviously not completely, throw out all caution or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But,
sure.
but be more open to things. I have said yes to things. My initial reaction was to say no, but I went on faith, and the character turned into a great opportunity to kind of show a little bit, to speak to my background of where I come from a little bit, and to also have a little, part that speaks to something I'm also passionate about, which is saving girls that do turn to that from, their goals in LA, trying to be an actor and fall prey to the casting couch and that kind of thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered what you were asking.
I so appreciate that, because I love that, to be able to kind of expand yourself. And I think when you get into roles that are different than what you can be typecast into as well, right? That when you have that range, you can really then start, pulling from what you bring yourself to that character, right? And then people can relate to that. Because a lot of times, like you said, if it's so black and white, where it's like, here's the angel and here's the devil, and it's like, do they ever meet together? And there's this mix of things that happen with that. And, I remember the first time I worked undercover prostitution, and we were looking for a serial killer. And, I did 12 years Catholic school. And so for me to, yes, there was a lot of things that happened in the police academy, and I was the only woman on my squad. And, there's all these learning curves, but that first time of working undercover, and it's acting in a lot of ways, with also having to look at your safety and the community. And there's just so many different things that you look at. But that role, if you will, allowed me to really look at a side that I never grew up with. That was something I had no idea, in terms of what to relate to and what to do. And I really got to see that work helped us not only in the serial killer, case, but in armed robberies. And there's so many things that interconnected in that world that people don't really realize, that when you do kind of step out of your comfort zone, you're touching people in ways that you may not have even known. And so I'm sure in that role that you did, people could maybe look at you and relate to different aspects of making different choices, right? Of looking things at a different way. So I think it's great that you have like this perspective where you're able to look at things in a deeper way. And one of the things I talk about here on the show is we look at what are some of because people can look at you in your career and go, well, but that's Tracy, and she's like beautiful and famous and all these things. But, people have, disempowering moments. There are those things that along the way that are challenging. And you talk about the self-esteem. I have one of my granddaughters just turned 13, and there's those ages where, whether it's social media, it's their friends, it's all of those things that impact that, people can get into a crossroads, especially young girls trying to fit in. Can you talk a little bit about, the self-esteem roller coasters that you went through, and what were some of your biggest lessons in that? Because I know a lot of our listeners, they have, teenager daughters and granddaughters and people that they want to be able to support. And that's sometimes where the gap happens too, right? Where you want to support them the most, they're trying to become more independent and separate, and maybe sometimes hiding things, right? And so there's a lot of tricky spaces along the way there.
Definitely. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes by the time they're 13, it might be almost not too late, but we have to start sooner. And I know for me, I didn't feel worthy of my parents' time, energy, everything. I didn't get that. I walked in the door and it was like, oh my God, you're home. It's great. It was mostly an empty house. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
The more people are built up in their, especially a girl with her father and maybe a son with his mother, where it's like you have that platonic relationship. Is that the right word? Did I say that right? It sounded weird. Platonic relationship where you're valued for, your personality, your character, your qualities like that. For me, I didn't never feel like I was valued for those things. And I was starving for attention. So as I started to become, kind of cute, I went through my Trevor phase, I used to call it, because I had moments where my mother was asked, how old's your son? Because I was very like short hair, bit my nails, looked very tomboy. But then when I started growing my hair out and started looking more like a girl, and I started getting attention, I was so starved for that attention. Right. But it was based solely on my appearance. And so it was the wrong kind of attention, right? But I was so hungry. And, when you're desperate, your standard is low. So we never want our kids to feel desperate for something, right? Just let's think about if you're dying of thirst, right? You'll drink water that maybe isn't, I need the Evian water. Well, if you're dying of thirst, you're going to drink out of that tap water after all, right? So we never want to get desperate where we lower our standard. And I think if we can keep building our kids up from a young age, but once they're in their teen years and they're like themselves, like feeling lost and maybe going on the wrong road or whatever, for me, it was tough. I mean, I went through a lot, and I talk about it in my book, which I'm hopefully making into a movie, about how promiscuity and those kind of things. But I will say, again, I'll bring up my saltwater reference. It's one of those things where you're just going to be like drinking salt water. You're just going to get more and more thirsty when you look for it that way. And another way I'll put it is there's a huge difference that I learned. There's a difference between pleasure and joy. And pleasure is fleeting. And so, the pleasure might be, I posted that very sexy picture and I got a ton of likes, right? Mm-hmm. But it's fleeting. Real joy lasts. And it's like guilt-free pleasure. Joy is like guilt-free pleasure. And that's what you need to seek. Seek things that bring you joy, not pleasure, and learn to differentiate the two.
Right. Well, one of our passion projects is supporting, helping children in the sex trafficking industry, and having some awareness around that, and making some changes in those areas. And I know that some of those gateway processes that happen is, in the social media, people will like do a sexy picture, right? Or they'll put it out there, and that later becomes blackmail. And I know a lot of times that for young girls, that the shame and, my parents won't understand, I'll be, all these things that'll happen, they feel like they can't turn back and they can't do something. What can you speak into in terms of young girls who may be in that kind of threshold place, and maybe even their own home isn't safe, right? We know that the numbers in that is also really high as well. You talk about surrounding yourself with people. What can you say for, young girls as far as to move past that kind of shame that they may be feeling, like they maybe made decisions that they wish they didn't make and they want to get back on track?
I think the best analogy I've ever heard about this is, if I take a $20 bill let's say $100 bill. Okay. Like 20 is nothing anymore, right? They'll take $100 bill. If I wad it up, it's still worth $100. If it gets a line on it or a mark on it, it's still worth $100. What you've been through does not change your value. Your value is still there. You still have value regardless of what you've been through. And I just want people to know that your past, it's like, it's a mosaic, broken glass or whatever. You can all be put back together and be made beautiful, and keep the hope. There are great organizations out there and people trying to help. It makes me so heartbroken to hear more and more about all this sex trafficking. And one of the things I think people need to understand is it's not as underground as they think. Yeah. It could be right in front of your face. It is so, I look back at my, casting couch and stuff that I went through in Hollywood that I talk about in my book. And it's like, it was in the public. I was approached and everything at nightclubs in LA about it. Millions of people around. It isn't just, oh, well, don't go out late at night and don't be by yourself because you'll get sex trafficked. It's in the public, in front of everybody under our noses.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I think this would be a great time, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, is, there is an organization called Safe House, and it's called On Watch. And like IamOnWatch.org. And it's actually a test that you can take about things that are in plain sight. And it's actually put together by people that are survivors, right? So they're telling you, hey, these are things that people could have seen, that they could have supported, and I didn't have the words for. And when you see something, you can't unsee it. And so to put it out there, and, I know that some of the statistics in terms of 40% of trafficking happens by family members, right? And so a lot of times we like to think that this is something that is, across the border or strangers. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it is important to have those conversations and to have it out there and have, but I love that analogy about the $100, that no matter what you do to it, it still has that same value. And I think it's important to support each other in that, in any way that we can. So on a lighter note, one of the things that I love to ask is that our home, there are so many things about our home that grounds us, that makes us feel good. And we feel differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our living room. What is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh my gosh, that's such a not good subject right now. This is a rental home that we just moved into. We sold our house in January because the market was going crazy, and we're looking at possibly moving out of California. And we just decided to sell now, and we're building in Arizona. So we're building I guess we could talk about that, right? Where I'm going with it. We're building a custom home on some land in Arizona right now. So we're working on designing it and all of that. I do miss my house I sold. I lived there for 12 years, and that's the only house my 11-year-old ever lived at. So it was bittersweet, but very excited about designing a house now. After you're at my age, you've been through enough homes where you know what's important to you and what you like and don't. And so, but yeah, there is something about, like you said, home. And that's one of the things, like I told my husband, I said, we sold our home a year before we're ready to move.
Right.
And so it just feels very unsettling right now, knowing I'm in a temporary place. And I think as women, especially, we need to nest, we need to feel like we're digging some roots, and knowing I can't dig roots right now is it's kind of a interesting place to be.
I totally get what you have. I've had my home for over 20 years, and I'm native to California, Southern California. I'm here in San Diego, and we go back and forth between here and Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. And, it's one of those, we love both places, but sometimes just getting that groundiness of what's actually home and what that feels like. So as you're dreaming of this new place, I'm sure every room's going to be beautiful. What do you intend to be your most favorite room?
I would say the kitchen, probably just because that's where, everybody gathers. And I unfortunately spend a lot of time time. I have two sons. I do a lot of cooking. But I love my bedroom too. Like you said, there's just something about, and there's so many times, like if we're away for a little bit or something and we come home and we just get in our own bed where my husband and I are just like, oh, I love my bed. There's just something about that as well. But I love a good shower too. I love a good, my master shower is, there's just something about that too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I find I sometimes get some of my most inspiring ideas in there, right? And I also think that's an
Yeah.
opportunity for God to speak to us because we're not
Yes.
having any other attention away from us, and just
Yeah.
that self-care. There's just so many things about a great shower
Yep.
that is
The
available to us.
smells and
Oh,
everything,
it's all good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you and support you in Monochrome. How can they do that?
I have a Facebook page and an Instagram for Monochrome, and it's Monochrome, I think _ documentary, but Monochrome/documentary, one or the other on both. But please follow there. I'm not real good at social media, I will admit. But I try and keep some updates going. We are still fundraising. That's part of what has been the delay in getting it done, is I have to stop to fundraise to earn more money to continue. And post-production is where we're at now. To continue that is quite expensive, but it's so important to get this right and to not do it partial, because this film's going to be attacked as it is. And I don't want to leave myself vulnerable for unnecessary attacks,
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Facebook and Instagram are probably the best ways to follow it.
Great. And we'll put those links as well in the show.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you so much for just being here and sharing your wisdom and your grace. And I would love to end on, how is it that you are being a force for good in the world?
I would say, well, with my documentary for one, I also am just an enormously empathetic person. But I'm just that friend that is always, I'm a quiet friend. I'm not that, loud, like always in your face friend. Not do anything to hurt people, and if I can avoid it.
I love that so much. I mean, being a great friend in the world, I mean, we forget, for people who have great people and great friends in your life, that a lot of people don't have that. And so thank you for being that in the world. It's so important to have that. Some of my friends call me the 2 a.m. friend, that I'm the one who they will call if they need something at 2 a.m. So, that's
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I'm that kind of person where it's like, I'm not like every weekend, let's party, but a friend in need is a friend indeed. I'm there for people. And I don't know, I'll do anything. Like if I see something, just like even with the documentary, I'm like, there's a need I can fill. What can I do?
I love that. Well, thank you so much. And thank you again for your time. And I can't wait to see it and to help support it. And for all of our listeners out there, follow Tracy, follow this movie, follow what's going on, what you may think about police officers and what's happening in the world. Know that the media doesn't always show all aspects of what's going on. You have to, go within your heart. You have to be able to do your own research, and things like this film will help you see things from a different perspective, so you can have a more well-rounded review of what's happening in the world. So go check that out. Also, make sure that you check out the movie as well that we had talked about, as far as Do You Believe? Because that is also a very beautiful film that will help you just build your faith, right? And there's these things that are happening right now where people need to get out of the fear that we talked about. They need to have some things that they can believe in, and they need to have a better perspective. So until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.